Basketball legend Cheryl Miller just dropped some serious truth bombs about coaching Caitlin Clark that nobody saw coming. Miller, one of the greatest players ever, and sister to NBA legend Reggie Miller, finally broke her silence on what really happened behind closed doors. The two basketball geniuses connected. Something magical happened that shocked everyone watching. Their chemistry was undeniable, and the results speak for themselves. Miller's candid comments from her recent All the Smoke podcast appearance reveal exactly why this pairing stunned the basketball world and what it means for the future of women's basketball. There seemed to be a bit of a bond between Clark and Miller. Obviously, Cheryl Miller, one of the most prominent women's basketball players of all time in her day, the brother of Reggie Miller, so it has been around the game in the limelight, and as coached, has done it all. And when she coached at the WNBA All-Star Game, of course, her and Clark have a little bit of a rapport and a vibe. And now today we're breaking down Cheryl Miller's explosive interview on the All the Smoke podcast with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, where she held absolutely nothing back about coaching Caitlin Clark. And trust me, what she revealed is going to change how you see both of these incredible basketball minds. There was this clip that went viral after one of Caitlin Clark's games. Cheryl Miller was there, and Caitlin ran up to her. Cheryl gave her some words and told her that she had a great game and gave her a big hug. In that time, when that moment happened, it really did feel like the world was against Caitlin. There's a lot of these media narratives going around, and so a lot of people who are fans of Caitlin Clark and thought that she maybe deserved better and didn't deserve some of these narratives that were going around, they thought that was a really wholesome clip, and a lot of people were praising Cheryl Miller, like, thank you for at least standing up for her in a time where it didn't feel like anybody else was. And so I like that, Cheryl Miller basically said, I saw a piece of, let's put this into context. Cheryl Miller isn't just any basketball figure. She's royalty, NCAA champion, Olympic gold medalist, Hall of Famer, and widely considered one of the greatest to ever touch a basketball. Some even say she was better than her brother Reggie, who's among the NBA's top 100 players of all time. Her basketball IQ and understanding of the game is on another level entirely. When Miller was announced as the coach for the WNBA All-Star team featuring Caitlin Clark, fans went crazy with excitement. This pairing seemed like a basketball match made in heaven, but nobody expected what would actually unfold, or the bombshells Miller would later drop about her experience. But now, Miller was asked about that time and cleared up a few narratives, had Caitlin Clark's back, talked about Clark and Reese playing together on the floor and how they actually worked really well and were simpatico. So a lot of interesting stuff from Cheryl Miller. And I know, whenever somebody of prominence who's been around the game, the old guard, if you will, doesn't push Caitlin Clark to the side and embraces her, that has a certain impact on her fan base. Let's get straight to the juicy part. When asked about coaching the All-Star Game, Miller's response was immediate and emphatic. Best coaching job ever, best coaching job ever. The excitement in her voice was palpable. But why? What made this experience so special compared to everything else in her legendary career? So the Cheryl Miller situation is mental. It is absolutely mental. From all sides, to be honest. It's crazy. It is just a crazy situation, and it has led to, I'm not joking you, the old guard in the WNBA, and not even WNBA media, just the old WNBA fans. The people had the big Twitter accounts. People had the big Twitter accounts interacting with players, trying to essentially cancel Cheryl Miller for the crime of, you guessed it, defending Caitlin Clark. And you're wondering what? There's no way. No. Miller didn't hesitate to address the elephant in the room, the controversial reception Caitlin Clark has faced since entering the WNBA. I'm going to be honest, because it needs to be said. Miller stated firmly, I could relate to that young lady and I felt for her. I know what it's like to be hated. This is powerful coming from Miller. As a black woman pioneer in basketball, she experienced her share of discrimination and hate. For her to draw this parallel to Clark's situation speaks volumes about the unnecessary vitriol Clark has faced. Miller continued, I can't imagine this young lady I don't want to use hate. but despised and people just having, she trailed off, clearly emotional about what she's witnessed. This moment of vulnerability from a basketball icon shows just how deeply affected she was by the treatment Clark has received. Miller did acknowledge Clark's confidence, calling her cocky for a good reason, and adding, "I love that about her." This endorsement of Clark's self-assurance is significant coming from someone who displayed similar confidence during her own playing days. Great players recognize that confidence isn't arrogance. It's a necessary tool for elite performance, but here's where Miller dropped the biggest bombshell of all. She completely dismantled the media narrative surrounding Clark's relationships with other players, especially Angel Reese. To watch the dynamics in the media, they had their narrative, and I was pleased and proud to see the narrative wasn't the truth. Think about that for a second. Miller is flat out saying that what's been portrayed in the media about Clark's relationships with her peers is false. This confirms what many fans suspected: the supposed beef and tensions between players like Clark and Reese were largely manufactured or exaggerated for clicks and views. Miller provided specific examples that contradict the popular narrative. Angel and her got along so well, and watching them practice and just get it. And Caitlin's like just fly, and watching her pass. This paints a completely different picture than what's been portrayed in much of the coverage. According to Miller, Clark was actively encouraging Reese to fly, to play her game and showcase her talents. This isn't the behavior of someone caught up in a rivalry or feud. It's the mindset of a true point guard looking to elevate her teammates. Miller then made an observation that should silence many of Clark's critics regarding her defensive abilities. "I didn't know how talented she was, and how well she sees the game in a 3D version. Think her defensively a lot better than I thought and gave her credit for." This is particularly noteworthy because one of the main criticisms of Clark's game has been her defense. Yet here's Cheryl Miller, one of the most knowledgeable basketball minds ever, saying Clark's defensive basketball IQ is significantly better than people give her credit for. Miller suggested that Clark understands defensive systems, rotations, and matchups on a deep level that casual observers might miss when focusing only on one-on-one defense. Miller also touched on the immense pressure facing young stars like Clark in today's social media age. "I don't know what it's like to be social media, Instagram, this. I don't know what it's like to be bombarded and have to be the breadwinner in the family, and be a brand and be worried about what I do or say. 24/7's being pulled in so many different directions." This acknowledgement of the unique challenges facing modern athletes shows Miller's empathy and perspective. Today's stars face scrutiny Miller never had to deal with, making their accomplishments all the more impressive. When addressing critics who diminish Clark's impact or question the attention she receives, Miller didn't mince words. "Come on, you big dummies. Is she getting hyped? Yes, but she was in the backyard putting in the same time, sometimes maybe more than you were. I can't fault her for what she was given." Miller's defense of Clark here is crucial. She's emphasizing that while Clark's popularity and marketing opportunities might inspire jealousy from some, they don't negate the tremendous work ethic and dedication that made her great in the first place. The hype didn't create Clark's talent. Her talent and hard work created the hype. Miller added another layer to this defense. "As much as she was given, you can't tell me if that door would have swung the other way where she didn't live up to the hype," suggesting that some critics are still waiting for it to fall, expecting or perhaps even hoping for Clark to fail. Miller called out this hypocrisy directly. "You big dummies, you getting paid now, right? Can everybody now pull up their chair and have a seat?" This reminds us that the rising tide of attention on the WNBA is lifting all boats. All players are benefiting from increased viewership, attendance, and contract values. The business side of the WNBA has improved dramatically since Clark's arrival. One of the most powerful moments came when Stephen Jackson asked Miller about any correlation between the Clark-Reese dynamic and the legendary Magic Johnson-Larry Bird rivalry that transformed the NBA in the 1980s. Miller didn't hesitate. "Oh, absolutely. Absolutely." She elaborated, "I'm sure that Larry and Irv used to laugh at white against black. They loved each other, East Coast, West Coast, loved each other and respected one another and understood that this rivalry, this tension, whatever it was, for the betterment of the game, but they never got caught up into it." This historical perspective is invaluable. Miller sees the Clark-Reese dynamic as potentially transformative for the WNBA in the same way Magic and Bird revolutionized the NBA, but only if the players themselves don't buy into the media-driven narratives of conflict. The podcast hosts asked Miller if she'd consider returning to coaching full-time, perhaps even taking the helm of Clark's Indiana Fever. Miller smiled but didn't commit, saying she enjoys her current broadcasting role. However, her evident chemistry with Clark and the success they had together in the all-star setting certainly makes fans wonder what could be. What makes Miller's comments particularly significant is her standing in the basketball world. Unlike some former players who have been critical of Clark either overtly or subtly, Miller has embraced Clark's impact on the game. She specifically mentioned others who will recognize her game but won't recognize her impact, pointing to a disconnect in how some legends are approaching the new generation of stars. When the conversation turned to Clark's record-breaking rookie season, Miller again defended Clark against criticism. Despite averaging impressive numbers around 17 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists per game, Clark faced claims from some quarters that she was underperforming. Miller pointed out the absurdity of these claims, noting that no player in WNBA history had ever averaged 15-5-5 and not made an All-1 team before. Miller also acknowledged the challenging situation Clark found herself in, joining an Indiana Fever team that had been among the league's worst performers the previous season. She contrasted this with other teams that had added significant talent like Nneka Ogwumike, Skylar Diggins-Smith and Khalil Copper, yet still struggled more than the Clark-led Fever by season's end. Another fascinating aspect of Miller's interview was her insight into Clark's court vision and playmaking abilities. Miller described Clark's understanding of the game as 3D, suggesting she sees angles and possibilities that others don't. This aligns with what viewers have witnessed: Clark's ability to make passes that seem impossible, threading needles between multiple defenders or hitting teammates in perfect stride. Miller's assessment extended beyond just the technical aspects of Clark's game. She spoke about Clark's leadership qualities and how she communicates with teammates. According to Miller, Clark has an innate ability to know when to push teammates and when to encourage them, qualities that can't be taught and are invaluable to team success. The chemistry between Miller and Clark during the All-Star weekend didn't go unnoticed by players, coaches, or fans. Their sideline interactions showed a mutual respect and understanding. At one point during a timeout, as captured on camera, Miller was seen saying, "I'm having fun, don't know what I'm doing, but I'm having fun." A moment of candor that endeared her to viewers and showcased the joy both she and Clark were experiencing. This joy translated directly to the court. Under Miller's guidance, Clark orchestrated the offense masterfully, setting up teammates for easy buckets and controlling the pace of the game. The result was a convincing victory for Team WNBA over Team USA, a statement win that caught many observers by surprise. What's particularly interesting about Miller's coaching approach with Clark was how she seemed to give the rookie point guard significant freedom. Rather than micromanaging, Miller appeared to trust Clark's instincts and decision-making. This trust paid dividends as Clark delivered one of her most complete performances of the season. Miller also touched on the broader impact Clark is having on the next generation of players. She observed how young girls are now showing up to games with signs for Clark, wearing her jersey and mimicking her logo shots in pre-game warm-ups across the country. This kind of inspiration is immeasurable and speaks to Clark's influence extending far beyond statistical impact. The conversation eventually turned to the challenges Clark and her peers face in navigating fame, social media scrutiny, and the business side of professional sports. Miller expressed her concern and hope. "I'm just glad that these young ladies who are at the upper top, the upper tier players, I hope and pray that they have a solid foundation and they know who they are." This sentiment reflects Miller's understanding of how difficult it can be to maintain perspective and mental health amidst intense public attention. Having experienced her own share of pressure and scrutiny during her career, Miller recognizes the importance of having strong support systems and clear self-identity. When discussing the future of the WNBA, Miller expressed optimism about where the league is headed with stars like Clark and Reese leading the way. She acknowledged that their arrival has coincided with unprecedented growth in viewership, attendance and media coverage, all positive indicators for the league's long-term health. However, Miller also cautioned against short-sightedness and pettiness within the women's basketball community. She called for unity and recognition that rising interest in the sport benefits everyone involved, from players to coaches to fans. This message of collaboration over competition resonated throughout the interview. Miller's insights provide a unique perspective on Clark's rookie season and what it means for the future of women's basketball. As someone who has been in Clark's position, a generational talent facing enormous expectations and scrutiny, Miller's assessment carries special weight. Her validation of Clark's game, approach and impact serves as a powerful counterpoint to some of the criticism Clark has faced. Perhaps most importantly, Miller's interview helps cut through the noise of media narratives to provide a clearer picture of who Clark really is as a player and person. Away from the hot takes and headline-grabbing controversies, Miller paints a portrait of a dedicated, intelligent, team-first player who's navigating an unprecedented level of attention with remarkable poise. For fans of women's basketball, Miller's endorsement of Clark should be seen as a promising sign for the future. When legends of the game recognize and embrace emerging stars, it creates a continuum of excellence that strengthens the sport's foundation. Miller seems to understand her role in this process, serving as both an honest evaluator and supportive voice for the next generation. As we look ahead to Clark's future seasons in the WNBA, Miller's insights give us a framework for what to watch for in her development. The defensive growth Miller identified, the advanced court vision she praised, and the leadership qualities she recognized all point to areas where Clark could continue to excel and surprise critics. The bottom line from Miller's interview is clear. Caitlin Clark is the real deal, and her impact on the game goes far beyond statistics or highlight plays. Through the eyes of a basketball legend like Cheryl Miller, we get a glimpse of Clark's true potential, not just as a great player, but as a transformative figure for women's basketball. The basketball world will never be the same after this groundbreaking partnership between two of the greatest basketball minds ever. Cheryl Miller's candid revelations about Caitlin Clark expose the truth behind the headline and show us what's really possible for the future of women's basketball.